You're listening to Why We Do What We Do.
Welcome to Why We Do What We Do. I am your safely arriving host, Abraham.
And I am your still not sold on the idea of this thing, host Shane.
We're a psychology podcast. And in case you're joining us for the first time, this is part 2 in a 2-part episode series that we're doing on the TSA. So if you missed the first part, it'd probably be in your best interest to go back and listen to the first part so you have all the context for what we're talking about. We always try and keep as much information contained within every episode as we can. And there's a lot that we've talked about already. So as a quick recap, let's talk about what we talked about last time. Or let's talk about what we talked about. Let's review, I guess I should say, what we talked about last time. I was a little salty about having my soap taken away a couple times ago when I flew. So that was one thing. And also we talked about that the TSA or travel in general is a giant industry that accounts for an enormous amount of the GDP.
Annually, the TSA spends something like $8 billion, and a lot of that money is used to do nothing. We have discovered that they have never stopped a terrorist attack. Most of those terrorist attacks or planned attacks happen prior to that person arriving at the airport, but the TSA formed as a result of a very particular terrorist attack. That would be 9/11.
Yes. We walked through other various sort of events in the timeline that led to specific policies from the TSA, taking off your shoes, no liquids, all of that. And that those were all caught prior to the person getting on a plane. They were not caught by airport security, or at least the ones that were caught by airport security were caught through routine screenings and not anything specific from the more intense measures that they've taken on, and that the policies were largely reactive. Well, we also talked about the fact that the people who are professionals usually do a lot of planning, and they usually know how to get around the TSA's policies and procedures. And when they get caught, it's prior to them ever boarding a plane. And there's really good intelligence agencies that are able to detect and deter that kind of activity.
Also, we learned that about 70 to 80% of contraband or banned items get through security. So when we talk about this thing working or not working, we realize that it doesn't really work that well because so much stuff gets through. But we did establish that there was progress because it had previously been that weapons such as knives, guns, bomb vests originally got through at 95%. So we have made progress in the last 5 years or so of this prevention tactic that they're looking at.
Yeah, up from an F to an F plus, as Tenacious D might say.
Yes.
Okay, we got you all caught up. If you'd like to support us, you can join us on Patreon. You can subscribe, leave us a rating and review. We can pick up some merch at our merch store. But if you're listening to this on the day that it publishes, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. It is November 15th. And on November 15th, we'd like to wish all of you listening a happy National Clean Out Your Fridge Day.
Yes, and in celebration of Abraham, it is National Drummer Day.
Hey, it's also National Recycling Day. Very important.
I like that. It's also Day of the Imprisoned Writer, which I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah, actually, that is very interesting. That I kind of want to dive into that some more. But it is Educational Support Professionals Day. Hey, we support those.
Yes, we do. We like our paras. It's also I Love to Write Day, which is I feel like that's me. I like to write. I like to do a lot of writing.
That is you. That's a fact.
Yeah.
And National Ample Time Day. I would like to make that every day.
Which I think is funny because we're recording this on the day after daylight savings time, which means that we lost time.
That is true.
Right? Or no, we gained time. No, we did gain time. We gained an hour.
Yeah, you're right.
We fell back. So it is national.
That's why.
Maybe it should have been today, you know?
Right? Yeah, it worked out.
It's National Bunt Day.
Yes.
Which, if you like cakes, that's cool.
I don't know if this is the national chain, but there is a place called Nothing Bunt Cakes.
They just opened one down the road for me.
Okay, cool. So it is a national chain. Great.
It's so fun.
Yeah, they get good stuff. National Spicy Hermit Cookie Day.
That sounds tasty. That sounds very fall.
Yeah.
And the most wholesome day of the entire year, it is Steve Irwin Day.
Aw. R.I.P. Now, we recapped what we talked about last time in discussing the TSA. So let's go ahead and get into all the sort of interesting stuff we haven't gotten to yet. And one of the things that we hadn't talked about that occurred to me as being a relevant part of this is, we call this security sort of theater, right? It's performative. It's meant to give the illusion of security. And so I had the thought that maybe that's part of it. It's that you have these screening procedures. Maybe it's the case that this performance of rigorous security is sufficient to deter and prevent would-be terrorists from even attempting an attack because they see how tightly controlled things are. Bruce Schneider, a security expert, points out that, quote, no terrorist is going to base his plot on getting a gun through airport security if there's a decent chance of getting caught, because the consequences of getting caught are too great, end quote. That is, security doesn't have to be perfect, just scary enough that would-be terrorists wouldn't be willing to test it. That's sort of the idea here.
That's a whole interesting thing to unpack. In general, if we want to spend some time reading Murray Sidman's Coercion and Its Fallout, we certainly could. I think that that's one of those things that we can unpack there.
Yeah.
In the freest nation in the world, apparently we have the highest incarceration rate. So, what is freedom? And that's a different episode. But
yes,
most of the country actually agrees with this. So one poll found that 79% of people thought that the TSA should prioritize screening ahead of saving travelers time and money. So screening is more important than the traveler's time and money. And about 80% of people agree with that, even though the majority of travelers reported that security was either somewhat or very inconvenient. Another 2012 Gallup poll found that 54% of people rated the TSA as doing, quote, an excellent or very good job at preventing terrorist attacks. Of those people that fly frequently, at least once every year, that number is 57%. So you see in time and time again, the majority of people think that the TSA is doing a good job and actually likes the security.
Yeah, the performance is working for the perception of safety from the point of view of the travelers, which I think is very interesting. And This is interesting logic if you consider that then the implication is that people who fly more regularly believe that the TSA is, on a regular basis, stopping or preventing people at the airport from executing some terrorist plot while they're standing casually in line at security next to passengers with guns, knives, and bombs who simply don't make it through the screening procedures. And I gotta say, if I was standing in a line where I actually thought someone next to me might have a bomb that they planned to detonate at a crowd, I would be unwilling to stand in that line, even if I thought that they might eventually get caught.
I would certainly not want to hang out there. No thanks.
Right.
So it's worth unpacking, I guess, this question. I think the question is this serving that role? Is it serving that role of that type of security that we're looking at? Maybe. There are so few possible or potential instances of this type of problem to occur, it's kind of difficult to tell. We do know that most plots are prevented before the TSA would be needed. We do know that identifying suspicious behavior programs that do occur, like if you see something, say something, we do know that none of that has ever stopped a terrorist. We also know that most of their measures aren't even catching the things that would make flying dangerous. We also know that the basic screening procedures they have always used has prevented some attacks that were planned and not the excessive over-the-top procedures that are used today. So we know that what used to exist was sufficient compared to today, which is kind of over-the-top and ridiculous, which hasn't necessarily prevented anything.
And although we're not making the case for this, some people have argued that it has had the actual opposite effect, that the facade of security makes people more relaxed around airports and flying by assuming that the TSA is catching dangers that it isn't actually catching, making it so that people who would try and do these acts feel bold enough to try it because they've seen how the performance really is theater and that it's not actually catching things. They might be more willing to actually try and get things through. And so that's an argument that some have made.
Right. And I could see some others making the argument like Vision makes about the Avengers, our very power welcomes power.
Right.
This challenge of we have the greatest security, and people going, oh yeah, you want to see? Let's go ahead and test this. Right. And let's see what happens. Others will argue that this security and fear of flying has actually killed more people than it may have potentially saved. So while flying remains one of the safest modes of transportation in comparing the number of deaths, 300 or 400 per year, driving remains one of the most dangerous modes of transportation, killing upwards of 35,000 people per year. In a 2011 paper in the Journal of Applied Economics, authors Blaylock et al. Analyzed the increase in driving following 9/11 and controlling for weather and traffic. There are an estimated additional 120 deaths every month from people driving instead of flying, up to 1,400 more deaths per year, more than even tend to occur when terrorist attacks happen. So basically what we're saying is that, we don't take those deaths lightly or anything like that, and terrorist attacks are never okay. On the contrary, what we're saying, it's because flying is so much safer, lowering the barrier to accessing flying will likely save lives no matter how you spin it. Essentially, driving is more dangerous than flying, but if we can make it easier for people to fly, not necessarily less safe, but easier for people to fly, then we might actually save some lives.
It sounds like we're being sort of shills for the airlines. We're not being paid by the airlines. It'd be great if we're being paid by the airlines. Bring it on, airlines.
Yeah, send us money.
If you listening have ever driven instead of flown because you were concerned about the safety of it, terrorist or otherwise, and I understand flying is like an intense thing. There are lots of reasons I don't like to do it, but it is much safer than being on the road. And one thing to consider on there is that the people who drive airplanes or fly, I guess they're not driving them, but that pilot airplanes are rigorously trained to do that. The people who are out on the road are less rigorously trained to be driving and manipulating their vehicle, and are often distracted by various things, are often befuddled by basic weather. You complain about the people who are out on the road. Those are people who, in some instances, chose to be there instead of being on an airplane when they knew they needed to get a very long distance. There are lots of reasons that people will choose to drive instead of fly that are very practical. And we're not saying that flying is the only or best solution to anything. Just saying that it is safer and that fewer people will die if they are choosing to fly instead of drive when they're making large commutes.
As an example, I just had a friend who drove from Florida to Rhode Island and tried to do it in a day and tried to do it overnight. Ooh. And we had to convince them not to drive overnight. Eventually she pulled off the side of the road and got a nap, but before she kept going. But if she would have flown, would have been much safer. And it's choice and all that. But like, imagine now you've got a 2-hour, 3-hour flight versus a 20-hour drive, right, and what that looks like and the safety that goes along with that. That discussion I think is pretty complicated. And overall, I think this discussion in general is complicated. It's complicated to attempt to understand the extent to which any of these procedures that we're talking about may or may not prevent someone from trying to plan an attack. Assuming that it will reduce the myriad of factors that may cause someone to want to engage in some attack to simply how difficult it is, all of those things are complex variables to kind of unpack and look at. Making problematic behavior more effortful is a successful component of a comprehensive plan to reduce those behaviors. So, if it is more difficult to do something, it is less likely that people will do that thing. Making things harder means that people will absolutely do them less. This is part of why you might just grab a Twinkie instead of an apple if you want a snack. Like, it makes sense. And apples are fairly effortful to eat, especially if you have sensitive teeth and you don't have a knife to cut it up.
Gotta wash it. That might be messy.
Yeah. It's a whole thing. That's only part of the reason, though. On the other hand, if they are motivated to do something as extreme as detonate a bomb on a plane or try to hijack it and oftentimes die in the process, the amount of effort it takes to clear security is unlikely going to stop them from trying. And as we have seen, we are unlikely to catch them either. So, yeah, a lot of stuff going on there.
So we'll continue talking about what I think the implications are here and understanding where we're going moving forward. And also, I think what we can do about at least some things here moving forward. But first, we are going to be shills for the advertisers.
Yay!
Okay, we're back. So we've been talking about the sort of logic around the TSA and how it works, right? Pointing out the fact that one of the features of this might just be to provide theater that implies security. There's also the feature that just making it more difficult to get through security might be preventative. And really, for my money, which as a taxpayer, the TSA is partially funded by my money.
That's true.
The perceived threat of security and consequences for getting caught is likely to have such a minimal effect, if any, that it's almost certainly not worth that $8 billion price tag that we mentioned. That's just, I think we could do better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we keep coming back to the $8 billion price tag, not because there are lots of programs that spend a lot of money. We understand that. I think what we're coming at is Like, we've found that it's not effective in the way that people think it is. I feel like the TSA is the dare of security. It's not working the way that people think it is, and it might actually be presenting a challenge. So maybe don't spend as much money in this and maybe spend money on things that work. But it is important at this point to ensure that we point out that we are not blaming the staff at the TSA for this. The TSA is a job just like any other, and there are people trying to do their job and provide for themselves and their families and be contributing members of society. They are doing as well as the system allows them to do and as they are set up to do. And yes, you're going to have people that are maybe they tried to be cops and it couldn't work. It didn't work out, so they end up getting into security because that's like the next logical step because they still wanted like authority and power. There are people that do that. And we're not saying that's everybody though. Most of the time, my interactions with the folks at the TSA in those spaces has been quite pleasant.
Yeah.
Because again, they're human beings just doing their job, and you are a human being encountering them at their job. So there are going to be days where they're at their best. There are going to be days where they're at their worst, but they are still human beings. So we're not blaming them. It's the system at large that's the problem.
As frustrating as it is that they took my soap, like I can't be mad at the person who did it. They were following the orders they were given. If they want to keep their job, they've got to follow their orders. It is the nature of how things work.
Right.
Working at the TSA is a thankless and miserable job. And a survey of 305 agencies, they found that the TSA ranked 303rd.
Oh my God.
Which is to say the third worst department to work for, coming in just behind the Office of Intelligence and Analysis and the Secret Service, which, as a reminder, is a job where you might be expected to sacrifice your life to protect some old bureaucrat while following them around and babysitting them all day. Like, that's what you're contending with.
Yeah.
So I feel bad for the people who are working for the TSA. I know why they hate their job. I hate their job and I don't even have it. So it's not their fault. It is the people who make the policy decisions about this. It is their fault.
Yeah. I would imagine that a lot of people come in with the insight that it's going to be a pain in the ass anyway, right? Like people are already primed for airport security to suck. So, like, people are walking in probably irritated, even though they're getting ready to go on some trip and see family or whatever. They're walking in already irritated with these people.
Totally.
So, it's not making it easier for everybody. One thing that helps is if you prepare to go, like when you are preparing, like wear shoes that are easy to slip on and off, stuff like that. So, but we'll talk about that. So, what do we do? What do we do at this point in time? Now we have all this information. What are we going to do? Now, some, even inside of the TSA, have called for abolishing the TSA at smaller airports that only handle small planes. If these connect to larger airports, then those people do their security screening once they get to the larger airport. This would relieve some amount of financial burden of paying for TSA without sacrificing very much in terms of security. Basically, for those smaller regional airports that aren't like that, they can do basic security checks. They don't need to do the full security check like you're seeing in every airport right now.
The town I grew up in, the airport there has one gate. That's it.
Right.
So it's like, may as well just, a basic metal detector, people walk through and then they board the plane. Right. And that would be all you need. Now, in response to this, Democrat Chuck Schumer of New York balked at the idea, writing, quote, TSA documents proposing to scrap critical passenger security screenings without so much as a metal detector in place in some airports would effectively clear the runway for potential terrorist attacks, end quote. Okay, maybe, but unlikely. Also, I don't think their suggestion was to actually abolish metal detectors either, so don't be stupid, Chuck.
I like calling people whose names are Chuck, just calling them Chuck and being really clear about that.
Yeah.
All right, Chuck. Chuck is a good word. Like a lot of hard sounds in that.
Yeah.
So others have pointed out that alternative measures are likely to be much more effective anyway. The time and money spent on intelligence gathering has seemingly been a smart investment that has paid off and is likely preventing most terrorist activity from taking place. Further, reinforcing the cockpit door has already proved to be an effective deterrent, and further strengthening security of the cockpit is likely to be an effective prevention strategy as like a general rule. Like if you can't get in to control the plane, then you're mostly going to be okay.
Right. And further, some have suggested that enrolling the general public in strategies and willingness to engage would-be terrorists would further help prevent subsequent attacks, as it already has in several instances. This could be voluntary, so nobody's forced to do this, and just increase responsiveness to threats. And again, I understand that there's danger involved there, but if these people are making it onto planes anyway, we want to figure out what we can do if security is not working, which it seems like it largely isn't.
Right. Absolutely. Now, Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller sardonically pointed out that we could eliminate airport security entirely if we just agree to all fly completely naked with no carry-on luggage. All right. I mean, those seats are going to be real sticky.
You'll have to wipe down the seats between flights. What does sardonic mean?
Oh, sardonic. What a great word. It does not mean sardine related. I do know that.
Nor is it completely the same as sarcastic.
Nope, it's not quite. So sardonic means grimly mocking or cynical. So that just makes me realize that I might be more sardonic than I am sarcastic. And that's a realization I'm having right now that I'm going to have to deal with.
Just a new label. That's fine.
Yeah, I like it. It's fine.
And I mean, to Penn's point, I'd be game for the whole naked plane thing, but they would need to vastly improve their heating and cooling game. Sitting butt-ass naked on a freezing leather seat sounds like a non-starter for me and probably most people. And as you said, might need to increase some sanitation measures, but there's probably there's an audience for this, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing. Maybe there is a business, or maybe there is a community. We did the whole episode on nudism and what that looks like. So I feel like there is an industry for naked planes. And so let's see if we can get that going. Like, why not try to make that work? Start a naked regional airport and see what happens. I would imagine you're going to get some bustling business as long as your sanitation stuff is up to snuff. So.
Right. We could also vastly scale back the nonsense practices that we know are ineffective. Basic policy changes here. Stop asking people to take off their shoes. That was done in reaction to something that nobody has tried again since then and is unlikely to be a relevant threat to worry about. Stop asking people to stand, spread eagle and body scanners. Those aren't even detecting some of the explosives that people might be bringing on with them anyway, and they're very, very expensive. Stop asking people to throw away their liquids. That one should be a low-hanging fruit. That was one of the dumbest policies they've ever done. Stop paying people to look for suspicious behavior. That isn't a thing. Like, the research is there. This is just pseudoscience. It's not catching anybody. Zero terrorists have been caught by that, and they spend so much money on it every year.
Yeah.
And then just use regular metal detectors. Keep the scanners if you want for like luggage, but you probably only need them for luggage. You don't really need them for anything else. Right.
Yeah. You don't need to put people in them. We have found that doesn't work, and people aren't hiding that kind of stuff inside themselves. Not really. I mean, maybe there's other things they're hiding, but that's a different conversation.
Well, and they make it through security anyway.
This would ultimately, all those things would save time, would save money, would make airports much more convenient, and would make no difference on how secure the TSA is. So all those things we just mentioned, you could eliminate, you could kind of rebuild that system, and it would probably save, I don't know, close to probably $2 billion alone just from those changes.
At least. Now, we haven't talked about, like, flying is bad for the environment. It is.
Yeah.
Arguably worse than driving. Driving isn't great either. And several companies are working on more environmentally friendly planes and will only get closer to that as a reality as more people continue to use flight as a mode of travel. If people aren't using it, there's no point in investing money in it. So we continue to engage the system. We will get more eco-friendly planes. I do get that as a concern, that planes are very bad for the environment. And like, we're moving toward a future where that is less the case.
Right. We aren't trying to sit here to ask people to relinquish their security. We're not asking people to relinquish their liberties. What we are saying is, and this is kind of always the argument that we arrive on, is like, if we're going to spend time and resources and money on a thing, then let's make sure that we are spending it on stuff that's the most efficient and most effective, which means that we can use those resources that are kind of being thrown away for other things as well.
Totally.
So if we're spending $8 billion on a program that is only like half working,
barely,
then we can use the extra money for the stuff that's being wasted for social programs, for universal health care, for all the things that we would advocate for that would be more effective systems. The gargantuan amount of fat that is choking the TSA to death is bananas. We can get rid of some stuff and like reallocate those resources in a really meaningful way.
Which is not to say that they're eating too many bananas. They're probably not eating enough bananas, but
you probably can't even bring a banana in the airport.
Yeah. It is both a liquid and a gel.
Yes. And the pilot could slip, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Don't want any of that. It's bad. All right. Well, we've clearly lost our way. We'll give way to the advertisers for a moment and then come back and start wrapping this thing up. Okay, so one of the questions I've had this whole time is how do other countries navigate their security protocols? And you had a story about your experience in Canada.
Yes. So a couple of years ago, I think it was like 5 years ago now, I flew to Canada and flew into Toronto, had to go through customs and all that stuff. But as I was flying within Canada, I went through metal detectors. I didn't go through any body scanners, and it was a basic x-ray machine for my luggage. And so as I went to go through the metal detector, I started taking off my belt, my shoes, and everybody's like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? You don't have to do all that. Like, they actually stopped me from doing that. Yeah, they're like, I got you. And I was like, I mean, yeah, sure. Like, I stand out not only as a giant in the country, but, my own behavior totally, outed me. But I didn't have to take off my belt. I didn't have to take off my shoes. I had to empty my pockets to make sure that there was nothing like extra weird in my pockets. But that was it. It was so easy to get through that airport and get through multiple airports while I was in Canada.
Nice.
Yeah.
I've never been to a Canadian airport, but that sounds lovely.
It was wonderful.
Israel has the reputation of the quote-unquote safest airports because their draconian security is worse than the U.S., if you can imagine that, with more flagrant racial profiling, vehicle checkpoints. So they'll actually stop vehicles as they're coming into the airport, aircraft checkpoints, they'll stop aircrafts, personal interrogations, and strip searches. So Israel is actually much worse. The United States is not the worst offender here. Israel is doing much worse. Although they, of course, tout themselves as being ultra safe.
Right. The EU adopted similar security to the US, requiring passengers to remove shoes, a ban on liquids, and scanning people and luggage. So what you might experience here in the US, you'll probably experience in Europe as well.
In Japan, airlines and airports have been largely responsible for their own security measures, which is kind of what most of the United States travel looked like pre 9/11. A metal detector and a scanning checked luggage and bags protocol is basically what they follow. However, the standards varied from airport to airport and from airline to airline. So the government has recently established a mandate to set security standards. However, this is likely to impact security personnel more than passengers, except for some of the more standardized screening procedures that everyone will get. So they probably won't have something as intense as what we have here. Mostly they were concerned that like it was so patchwork that they weren't getting a comprehensive security, and they just want some sort of standards to follow, which makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think it's completely reasonable. Now, the most distinct, though, that we found was that many countries have hired private security firms to handle airport security. So although we're pretty skeptical of the motivation of companies whose bottom line is profit to handle sensitive human interactions, the general consensus seems to be that private security in other countries is faster, less onerous, cheaper, and at least as secure as America's TSA. So they're saving money and they are still doing the same job, essentially. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah, I kind of found both from right and left wing places that I was looking that everyone's kind of like, actually, private security is probably the way to go when it comes with airport security. As I said, I tend to worry about what their motivations are when they're handling private, sensitive things like this. But because I saw such a universal call for this, I was like, okay, at least most experts on both sides seem to actually be in an agreement, and that is very rare. Usually, if both sides are in agreement, it's probably something most people are going to be on board with. So if that's the way to go, I'm fine with it. The only thing is similar to Japan is that I see as being a potential barrier is a total hodgepodge patchwork of you don't know what you're going to get when you go to airport security,
right?
Which I think would be very inconvenient. So I think as long as there are still standards, things will be fine. But they could potentially increase the efficiency of the system and ultimately make it cheaper and more effective. So that would be I think I'm on board with that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Now, if you've been listening to us for a while, you might recognize that at one point we have a section of our episodes we like to call interesting tidbits. We also have take-home points sometimes and call them interesting tidpoints on accident. So here's our interesting tidpoints. I actually got these from Mental Floss, so thanks to Mental Floss for these interesting ideas around TSA and security. These are things you may or may not know about going through airport security.
Your pets that you bring onto the plane, your pets that you travel with, they have to get pat down. Those poor, loving animals who asked for none of this. So dogs are really great at this, but cats are apparently a nightmare. I would imagine chihuahuas are probably a nightmare too.
Yeah.
But cats are a nightmare, and if they escape their carrier before they are pat down, they're considered a security breach and a justifiable reason to shut down an entire terminal until it is apprehended. Now I'm picturing like other animals that people might try to bring on. Like you see the video of like the emotional support peacock that somebody tried to bring on one time.
Yeah.
So like I imagine what that process is like, trying to rifle through all those feathers and whatnot,
I thought about that. Or the emotional support python.
Yeah, exactly.
TSA is just looking at it going, nah, they're good.
Yeah, no thanks.
Apparently, TSA uses code words to alert one another to attractive or difficult passengers. So, hotel papa is a term used to describe an attractive passenger. The H in there means hot, apparently. Whereas describing someone as very nice is meant to alert TSA agents to a very annoying or difficult traveler. They might also use code numbers that would be unique to whatever location they're working in. So they sort of have some codes to interact with one another to communicate about passengers that they're dealing with.
That's so fun. I love that. As long as it doesn't get like grossly overused or like turned into something really terrible.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, especially elaborate hairstyles are considered a security risk, as they can be difficult to scan or search and can hide weapons. No information on whether searching someone's braids has turned up any weapons, though. So far, no knives are hidden in braids. I've had my bun searched a couple times.
Yeah.
Not my buns, but my bun.
Just one bun.
Just one bun.
TSA agents generally like it when people are tired, and therefore tend to like evening flyers and non-business flyers more. Early morning and business travelers tend to be meaner. So they like the sort of late night people because the morning people who are often rude to them.
I could see that because they're waiting to get coffee or they haven't had coffee yet. TSA agents frequently won't talk about the fact that they work for the TSA or for Homeland Security to avoid criticisms and attacks from people. I would imagine that, like, same thing, like if you work at the IRS, you probably don't want to tell people you work at the IRS because you don't want to deal with like all the negative stuff that people have to say about that. That's probably not fun.
We should actually talk about the IRS at some point, because the recent proposals have suggested cutting funding to the IRS. And part of the reason our tax system is such a disaster in this country is because they keep cutting funding to the IRS and then complaining the IRS doesn't work well while they're underfunding it like crazy.
Yeah.
So that might be worth at least a mini at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Apparently, meats and cheeses look pretty much exactly like C4 when going through luggage scanners. And so people who are carrying meats and cheeses, their bags are frequently flagged for inspection because they can't tell the difference between cheddar and an explosive device on the scanner.
Could you imagine trying to bring in a wheel of Parmesan and like being like, no, it's not a bomb, it's cheese, dudes. That is my favorite. Like somebody trying to like somebody like, listen, I got this brie. I'm not trying to blow up the plane.
The other way to say this is that C4 looks like cheese.
Yeah. So general rule, don't bring cheese, don't bring C4, don't eat C4, don't blow up cheese.
Those are the rules. That's a good take home.
That should be the take home from this entire episode. Now, for full body scans, y'all are going to love this. This is fantastic. For full body scans, TSA agents have to specify a gender to the computer, which I'm sure is a lot of fun. So it looks for the correct bits. Gender ambiguous individuals or gender appearances that confuse a TSA agent may result in a flag from the scanner that results in a pat-down. Therefore, trans and intersex people are much more likely to be flagged for additional screening, unfortunately.
Yeah.
This is, again, a situation where you've got a binary system applied to a non-binary group of people.
Yes. So for those people out there who are trans or intersex, you probably have already encountered this. And if you haven't, be alert. You might face additional scrutiny at the airport. We're sorry.
Yes.
We agree this is dumb and not appropriate. Apparently, if you go to a TSA, if you're flying, you will be, but the TSA agents frequently rotate jobs throughout a workday. As often as every 30 minutes, they might change positions. They'll switch between maybe running the scanner or checking tickets or searching flagged luggage. Like they're apparently just constantly rotating them through the different jobs that they do in the security setting.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen that. Like, I feel like I've been in line long enough to watch that rotation happen multiple times.
I think I have two, and I didn't really know, like, it just seemed like it was routine. Like, I didn't realize that was that common, I think, until I
an actual policy.
Put it together the notes. Yeah.
If you're using paper tickets, I tend to use paper tickets because I am an old man. So if you're using paper tickets, they may actually use a ticket to write a code on it to flag you for subsequent additional screening or to indicate that you've been through security already. So they may actually like note that on your ticket. So you should look at like if there's any sort of coding or weird writing on your ticket just in case.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you know what it is, but yes, when they write on your ticket, it can mean a number of things. One of them could mean that you're good. Another could be like a warning to the next person to look at your ticket to pull you aside and do the thing,
Yeah.
TSA agents have to go through active shooter trainings frequently and be vigilant against potential threats. If there's a credible threat, they may be asked to avoid wearing their uniform while outside the airport. So when they're coming to and from work, they might have to change when they get to work. And so this has resulted in heightened stress for TSA agents and has led to a lot of turnover among people who work at the TSA because they end up feeling like they're not safe at their job. They don't like dealing with that level of scrutiny, being hated by people, being afraid to come to work. And so they'll just end up quitting after a short period of time sometimes.
Right, absolutely. TSA agents, they have to constantly change their gloves. I don't know if you've noticed while you're traveling, but they typically, a lot of them wear gloves to handle luggage and like to deal with people and stuff. So they have to constantly change their gloves. So when you ask them to change their gloves, it's probably annoying and probably a waste of time because they probably just changed their gloves. They probably literally just changed it because they have to change them so often.
Right. TSA agents have a probationary period up to 2 years where they're working not as a full like agent. After that time, they are locked into the system, and it becomes very difficult to fire them, short of them committing actual crimes. So assuming they make it the 2 years, which a lot of them don't, but assuming that they do, then after that, they become very difficult to get rid of if they're in the system.
Right. And then I think this one's kind of the kicker, is the people that are protecting you, the TSA agents. There are no airport benefits for the TSA agents. There's no discounts on flights. There's no preferential treatment. There are no gifts. There are no anything additional at all. So you are working as a TSA agent and maybe you get some government benefits, but you don't get any airport benefits whatsoever. I mean, when I worked at Starbucks, I got a free cup. I got free drinks while I worked, and I got a free pound of coffee every week. So it sounds like I got more benefits working as a barista at Starbucks than the people that are protecting you from terrorist attacks at the airport get from their own airport that they work at. Wild.
Potentially protecting you. We know they're actually doing precious little to actually protect anybody. But yes,
right.
Your point is valid.
Yeah. Right.
I think that's what we have to say about the TSA. I think my big take home is like this is an institution that is making our lives miserable. We're spending a ton of money on it. They don't like it. We don't like it. The agents don't like it. Everybody doesn't like it. It doesn't seem like it's working very well, and it is costing us a boatload of money, and we can do better. So I think from the psychological perspective of prevention, it's like possible that it kind of maybe works like that sometimes a little bit, but it's the people who have already made that decision to like they're going to do some terrorist activity, that is unlikely to be the thing that deters them, is the image of security.
I think my only take home point, besides all the facts that it's a lot of money, doesn't work the way, all that stuff, is that, again, this is a systems issue, not a people issue. There are people that use the system to be jerks, but for the most part, the people that you're dealing with in the TSA are just people just trying to get by, just doing their best in a situation like we all are. So be kind to them.
Yeah.
It will probably work out better for you in the long run to be kind to the people that are preventing you from going into the airport in general. It's kind of like, don't be a jerk to your servers, the people who are messing with your food. Like, it's kind of one of those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Except these people can stop you from flying on planes forever.
Yeah. And don't bring meat and cheese in your luggage.
Yeah, or C4. I mean, don't bring cheese or C4. Like, I think that's an easy thing.
Yes, there you go. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to my team of people. Justin is our production and editing person. Shane, thank you so much for recording with me today and for being my co-host in general. And our social media coordinator is Emma Wilson. As I mentioned, people who joined us on Patreon get extra behind the scenes benefits, including ad-free episodes, early episodes, notes, all that sort of thing. That list of people includes Mike M, Megan, Layla, Mike T, Justin, Kim, Joshua, Brad, Stephanie, Olivia, Brian, and Ashley. Thank you all for your continued generosity. We love you so much.
Yes. We love you so much. Y'all are so wonderful. We appreciate you on so many levels, on every level.
On every level. We like to end our discussions with some recommendations for things that we enjoy or like or have found that we want to share with people. So when you hear this sound that's like part of our intro music, then you're going to have some ads as a warning, and then it'll come back, and that means the ads are done, and you can listen to our recommendations.
Yay!
Okay. Thank you, advertisers, I guess.
Maybe?
Yeah. Let's get to our recommendations.
Yay! I love recommendations.
Recommendations.
Okay, I am recommending a game, like I do sometimes. I don't think I've recommended this one. This is sort of better for a party game, but I think it's only maybe 7 to 8 people, something like that. It's basically Balderdash, but the theme is fish. It's called Sounds Fishy. People get dealt random fish that are they're all gray, and you flip them over and you secretly look and see what color you have. And if you have blue, you have to tell the truth. If you don't have blue, then you have to lie. And then the person who is guessing holds up a card, and on one side they have a question, on the other side they have an answer that everybody else can see, and then everybody gives them an answer to their question, and only one person's telling the truth, and they have to guess who the liars are. And then if they've guessed the liars correctly, guess who's telling the truth. If they make a mistake, they have to stop, or they can stop along the way if they want to. But then people get points for correctly fooling the guesser, and that's the theme of the game. So it's really fun. It's really easy. Really great for a party game. Fairly small. You can pick it up, lots of places where they have board games. So you might check it out. Sounds fishy.
That sounds so fun. I love that. It's been a long time since I played any games. We used to do a family game night, and right now in my house, I am the reigning champion. I am undefeated. And there are games that are not skill at all, but I just happen to win. I happen to be really good at Uno.
Right.
So I always love games like this where it's like, I can continue my holy reign of terror in terms of being the king of the games here. So
it's a good one. You check it out.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm recommending a band. I'm recommending music. I love music, and I have been on a new music kick more recently. And I have found this band called Hotline TNT. I will say, don't like the name of the band. There are plenty of band names that I dislike where the band is actually good. So they put out a new record called Cartwheel. If you are a fan of kind of like slow, shoegazy type of music, like if you like hum, if you like stuff that's got like some really good melody, a lot of fuzz, a lot of like kind of, it sounds like very early 90s. You can hear like a little bit of Sonic Youth in there, a little bit of Pixies, that kind of world.
Ooh.
If you like that stuff, but like a little bit more modern, I would say check out this band.
Okay.
A friend of mine saw them live, said they were really great. They played in an abandoned subway station in New York, and that they were really, really cool. And so, the new record is called Cartwheel. It just came out. The band is called Hotline TNT. Yeah, you should definitely give it a listen.
Dig it. I do love the Pixies.
Yeah, they're so great.
Cool. Good stuff. All right. Well, if you agree or disagree with anything we've had to say about the TSA, you should reach out to us directly. You can email us at info@wwdpodcast.com. You can also reach us on all the social media platforms. As I said, if you would like, you can pick up some merch. We might be doing some kind of Black Friday special thing, but regardless, there are mugs and shirts and beanies and all kinds of good stuff over there. So go check out our merch store if you're interested in any of that. Also supports us, and it looks cool. Like you're like, I have a podcast merch that makes me really smart. That's how everybody thinks. What everybody thinks when they see someone who has podcast merch. So you can join that elite crowd. Otherwise, I think that is pretty much all that I have. Is there anything that I left out or missed, or anything you would like to add before we wrap up today, Shane?
Nope, I got nothing else.
All right, very good. All right, well, thank you everyone for listening. This is Abraham.
This is Shane.
We're out.
See ya.
You've been listening to Why We Do What We Do. You can learn more about this and other episodes by going to www.wwdpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you have an awesome day.